Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bibliobibuli, where we are almost done with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Last time.
The last chapter, we went through the last portal into Hogwarts, into the Room of Requirements that Neville has created along with the rest of the DA. And everyone's ready for revolution, but Harry is like, whoa, guys, we gotta think this through a little bit. I got stuff to do. And he doesn't want to tell them anything about it. He thinks Dumbledore wouldn't want him to. But then he had the whole flashback with Aberforth. Well, Dumbledore was all about secrets and lies. He was very good at it. So Harry started to second-guess himself a little bit. And told them that he was looking for something of Ravenclaw's. Didn't tell them it was a Horcrux, but he was thinking it may be the lost diadem. And after he saw what it was, there was a Death Eater waiting, who pressed the dark mark, and now Voldemort's on his way. Who knows what'll happen.
Chapter 30. The Sacking of Severus Snape. The moment her finger touched the mark, Harry's scar burned savagely. The starry room vanished from sight, and he was standing upon an outcrop of rock beneath a cliff, and the sea was washing around him, and there was triumph in his heart. They have the boy. A loud bang brought Harry back to where he stood. Disoriented, he raised his wand, but the witch before him was already falling forward. She hit the ground so hard that the glass in the bookcases tinkled. "I've never stunned anyone before except in our DA lessons," said Luna, sounding mildly interested. "That was noisier than I thought it would be." And sure enough, the ceiling began to tremble. Scurrying, echoing footsteps were growing louder from behind the door leading to the dormitories. Luna's spell had awoken Ravenclaw sleeping above. "Luna, where are you? I need to get under the cloak." Luna's feet appeared out of nowhere. He hurried to her side, and she let the cloak fall back over them as the door opened, and a stream of Ravenclaws, all in their nightclothes, flooded into the common room. There were gasps and cries of surprise as they saw Alecto laying there unconscious. Slowly they shuffled in round her, a savage beast that might awake at any moment and attack them. Then one brave little first-year darted up to her and prodded her backside with his big toe. "I think she might be dead," he shouted with delight. "Oh, look," said Luna happily, as the Ravenclaws crowded in round Alecto. "They're pleased." "Yeah, great." Harry closed his eyes, and as his scar throbbed he chose to sink again into Voldemort's mind. He was moving along the tunnel into the first cave. He'd chosen to make sure of the locket before coming. That would not take him long. There was a rap on the common room door, and every Ravenclaw froze. From either side Harry heard the soft musical voice that issued from the eagle knocker. "Where do vanished objects go?" "I don't know, do I? Shut it!" snarled an uncouth mouth that Harry knew was that of the Caro brother, Amicus. Alecto, are you in there? Have you got him? Open the door." The Ravenclaws were whispering amongst themselves, terrified. Then, without warning, there came a series of loud bangs as though someone was firing a gun into the door. "Alecto, if he comes and we haven't got Potter, do you want to end up the same way as the Malfoys? Answer me!" Amicus bellowed, shaking the door for all it was worth, but it still would not open. The Ravenclaws were all backing away, and some of the most frightened began scampering back up the stairs to their beds. Then, just as Harry was wondering whether or not he ought to blast open the door and stun Amicus before the Death Eater could do anything else, a second, most familiar voice rang out from beyond the door. "May I ask what you're doing, Professor Caro?" "Trying to get through this damned door!" shouted Amicus. "Go and get Flitwick. Get him to open it now." "But isn't your sister in there?" said Professor McGonagall. "Didn't Professor Flitwick let her in earlier this evening at your urgent request? Perhaps she could open the door for you. Then you needn't wake up half the castle." "She ain't answering, you old besom. You open it. Go on, do it now." "Certainly, if you wish," said Professor McGonagall with awful coldness. There was a genteel tap of the knocker, and the musical voice asked again, Where do vanished objects go? Into non-being, which is to say, everything, replied Professor McGonagall. Nicely phrased, replied the eagle door-knocker, and the door swung open. The few Ravenclaws who'd remained behind sprinted for the stairs as Amycus burst over the threshold, brandishing his wand. Hunched like his sister, he had a pallid, doughy face and tiny eyes, which fell at once on Alecto, sprawled motionless on the floor. He yelled out in fury and fear. "What have they done, these little whelps?" he screamed. "I'll cruciate the lot of them until they tell me who did it. And what's the Dark Lord going to say?" he shrieked, standing over his sister and smacking himself on the forehead with his fist. "We haven't got 'em, and they're gone and killed her." "She's only stunned," said Professor McGonagall impatiently, who'd stooped down to examine Alecto. "She'll be perfectly all right." "No, she bludgeon well won't," bellowed Amycus. "Not after the Dark Lord gets a hold of her. She gone and sent for him. I felt me mark burn, and he thinks we've got Potter." "Got Potter?" said Professor McGonagall sharply. "What do you mean, got Potter?" "He told us Potter might try and get inside Ravenclaw Tower, and to send for him if we caught him." "Why would Harry Potter try to get into Ravenclaw Tower? Potter belongs in my house." Beneath the disbelief and anger, Harry heard a little strain of pride in her voice, and affection for Minerva McGonagall gushed up inside him. "We was told he might come in here," said Caro. "I don't know why, do I?" Professor McGonagall stood up, and her beady eyes swept the room twice. They passed right over the place where Harry and Luna stood. "We can push it off on the kids," said Amycus, his pig-like face suddenly crafty. "Yeah, that'll do. We'll say Alecto was ambushed by the kids. Them kids up there." He looked up at the starry ceiling toward the dormitories. "And we'll say they forced her to press her mark, and that's why he got a false alarm. He can punish 'em. Couple of kids, more or less. What's the difference?" "Only the difference between truth and lies, courage and cowardice," said Professor McGonagall, who turned pale. "A difference, in short, which you and your sister seem unable to appreciate. But let me make one thing very clear. You are not going to pass off your many ineptitudes on the students of Hogwarts. I shall not permit it." "Excuse me." Amycus moved forward until he was offensively close to Professor McGonagall, his face within inches of hers. She refused to back away, but looked at him as if he was something disgusting she'd found stuck to a lavatory seat. "It's not a case of what you'll permit, Minerva McGonagall. Your time's over. It's us what's in charge here now, and you'll back me up or you'll pay the price." And he spat in her face. Harry pulled the cloak off of himself, raised his wand and said, "You shouldn't have done that." As Amycus spun round, Harry shouted, "Crucio!" The Death Eater was lifted off his feet. He writhed through the air like a drowning man, thrashing and howling in pain. Then with a crunch and a shattering of glass, he smashed into the front of a bookcase and crumpled, insensible, to the floor. "I see what Bellatrix meant," said Harry, the blood thundering through his brain. "You really need to mean it." "Potter!" whispered Professor McGonagall, clutching her heart. "Potter, you're here? What? How?" She was struggling to pull herself together. "Potter, that was foolish." "He spat at you," said Harry. "Potter, well, that was very, very gallant of you, but don't you realise—" "Yeah, I do," Harry assured her. Somehow her panic steadied him. "Professor McGonagall, Voldemort's on the way." "Oh, are we allowed to say the name now?" asked Luna with an air of interest, pulling off the invisibility cloak. This appearance of a second outlaw seemed to overwhelm Professor McGonagall, who staggered backward and fell into a nearby chair, clutching at the neck of her old tartan dressing gown. "I don't think it makes any difference what we call him," Harry told Luna. "He already knows where I am." In a distant part of Harry's brain, the part connected to the angry, burning scar, he could see Voldemort sailing fast over the dark lake in the ghostly green boat. He'd nearly reached the island where the stone basin stood. "You must flee," whispered Professor McGonagall. "Now, Potter, as quickly as you can." "I can't," said Harry. "There's something I need to do. Professor, do you know where the diadem of Ravenclaw is?" The diadem of Ravenclaw? Of course not. Hasn't it been lost for centuries?" She sat up a little straighter. "Potter, it was madness, utter madness for you to enter the castle." "I had to," said Harry. "Professor, there's something hidden here that I'm supposed to find, and it could be the diadem. If I could just speak to Professor Flitwick." There was a sound of movement, of clinking glass. Amycus was coming round. Before Harry or Luna could act, Professor McGonagall rose to her feet, pointed her wand at the groggy Death Eater, and said, "Imperio!" Amycus got up, walked over to his sister, picked up her wand, then shuffled obediently to Professor McGonagall and handed it over along with his own. Then he lay down on the floor beside Alecto. Professor McGonagall waved her wand again, and a length of shimmering rope appeared out of thin air and snaked round the Carrows, binding them tightly together. "Potter," said Professor McGonagall, turning to face him again with superb indifference to the Carrows' predicament, "if he who must not be named does indeed know that you are here—" As she said it, a wrath that was like physical pain blazed through Harry, setting his scar on fire, and for a second he looked down upon a basin whose potion had turned clear, and saw that no golden locket lay safe beneath the surface. "Potter, are you all right?" said a voice, and Harry came back. He was clutching Luna's shoulder to steady himself. "Time's running out. Voldemort's getting nearer. Professor, I'm acting on Dumbledore's orders. I must find what he wanted me to find. But we've got to get the students out while I'm searching the castle. It's me Voldemort wants, but he won't care about killing a few more or less. Not now. Now he knows I'm attacking Horcruxes." Harry finished the sentence in his head. "You're acting on Dumbledore's orders?" she repeated with a look of dawning wonder. Then she drew herself up to her fullest height. "We shall secure the school against he who must not be named while you search for this object." "Is that possible?" "I think so," said Professor McGonagall dryly. "We teachers are rather good at magic, you know. I'm sure we will be able to hold him off for a while if we put all our best efforts into it. Of course, something'll have to be done about Professor Snape. Let me. And if Hogwarts is about to enter a stage of siege with the Dark Lord at the gates, it would indeed be advisable to take as many innocent people out of the way as possible. With the Floo network under observation, an apparition impossible within the grounds—" "There's a way," said Harry quickly, and he explained about the passage leading into the Hog's Head. "Potter, we're talking about hundreds of students." "I know, Professor. But if Voldemort and the Death Eaters are concentrating on the school boundaries, they won't be interested in anyone who's disapparating out of the Hog's Head." "There's something in that," she agreed. She pointed her wand at the Carrows, and a silver net fell upon their bound bodies, tied itself round them, and hoisted them into the air, where they dangled beneath the blue and gold ceiling like two large, ugly sea creatures. "Come, we must alert the other heads of house. You'd better put that cloak back on." She marched toward the door, and as she did, she raised her wand. From the tip burst 3 silver cats with spectacle markings round their eyes. The Patronuses sleekly ran ahead, filling the spiral staircase with silvery light, as Professor McGonagall, Harry, and Luna hurried back downstairs. Along the corridors they raced, and one by one the Patronuses left them. Professor McGonagall's tartan dressing gown rustled over the floor, and Harry and Luna jogged behind her under the cloak. They descended 2 more floors when another set of quiet footsteps joined them. Harry, whose scar was still prickling, heard them first. He felt in the pouch round his neck for the Marauders' map, but before he could take it out, McGonagall seemed to become aware of their company. She halted, raised her wand, stepped to Duel, and said, "Who's there?" "It is I," said a low voice. From behind a suit of armour stepped Severus Snape. Hatred boiled up in Harry at the sight of him. He'd forgotten the details of Snape's appearance and the magnitude of his crimes, forgotten how his greasy black hair hung in curtains round his thin face, how his black eyes had a dead cold look. He was not wearing night clothes, but dressed in his usual black cloak, and he too was holding his wand ready for a fight. "Where are the Carrows?" he asked quietly. "Wherever you told them to be, I expect, Severus," said Professor McGonagall. Snape stepped nearer, and his eyes flitted over Professor McGonagall into the air around her, as if he knew that Harry was there. Harry held his wand up too, ready to attack. "I was under the impression," said Snape, "that Alecto had apprehended an intruder." "Really?" said Professor McGonagall. "And what gave you that impression?" Snape made a slight flexing movement of his left arm where the dark mark was branded into his skin. "Oh, but naturally," said Professor McGonagall. "You Death Eaters have your own private means of communication. I forgot." Snape pretended not to have heard her. His eyes were still probing the air all around her, and he was moving gradually closer, with an air of hardly noticing what he was doing. "I did not know that it was your night to patrol the corridors, Minerva." "You have some objection?" "I wonder what could have brought you out of bed at this late hour." "I thought I heard a disturbance," said Professor McGonagall. "Really? But all seems calm." Snape looked into her eyes. "Have you seen Harry Potter, Minerva? Because if you have, I must insist." Professor McGonagall moved faster than Harry could have believed. Her wand slashed through the air, and for a split second Harry thought that Snape must crumple unconscious, but the swiftness of his shield charm was such that McGonagall was thrown off balance. She brandished her wand at a torch on the wall, and it flew out of its bracket. Harry, about to curse Snape, was forced to pull Luna out of the way of the descending flames, which became a ring of fire that filled the corridor and flew like a lasso at Snape. Then it was no longer fire, but a great black serpent that McGonagall blasted to smoke, which reformed and solidified in seconds to become a swarm of pursuing daggers. Snape avoided them only by forcing the suit of armour in front of him, and with echoing clangs the daggers sank, one by one, into its breast. "Minerva!" said a squeaky voice, and looking behind him, still shielding Luna from flying spells, Harry saw Professors Flitwick and Sprout sprinting up the corridor toward them in their nightclothes, with the enormous Professor Slughorn panting along in the rear. "No!" squealed Flitwick, raising his wand. "You'll do no more murder at Hogwarts!" Flitwick's spell hit the suit of armour behind which Snape had taken shelter. With a clatter it came to life. Snape struggled free of the crushing arms and sent it flying backward toward his attackers. Harry and Luna had to dive sideways to avoid it again, as it smashed into the wall and shattered. When Harry looked up again, Snape was in full flight, McGonagall, Flitwick and Sprout all thundering after him. He hurtled through a classroom door. Moments later he heard McGonagall cry, "Coward! Coward!" "What's happened? What's happened?" asked Luna. Harry dragged her to her feet, and they raced along the corridor, trailing the invisibility cloak behind them, into the deserted classroom where Professors McGonagall, Flitwick and Sprout were standing at a smashed window. "He jumped," said Professor McGonagall, as Harry and Luna ran into the room. "You mean he's dead?" Harry sprinted to the window, ignoring Flitwick and Sprout's yell of shock at his sudden appearance. "No, he's not dead," said McGonagall bitterly. "Unlike Dumbledore, he was still carrying his wand, and he seems to have learned a few tricks from his master." With a tingle of horror, Harry saw in the distance a huge bat-like shape flying through the darkness toward the perimeter wall. There were heavy footfalls behind them and a great deal of puffing. Slughorn had just caught up. "Harry!" he panted, massaging his immense chest beneath his emerald-green silk pyjamas. "My dear boy! What a surprise! Minerva, do explain, please. Severus, what—" "Our headmaster is taking a short break," said Professor McGonagall, pointing at the Snape-shaped hole in the window. "Professor!" Harry shouted, his hands at his forehead. He could see the inferi-filled lake sliding beneath him, and he felt the ghostly green boat bump into the underground shore, and Voldemort leapt from it with murder in his heart. "Professor, we've got to barricade the school. He's coming now." "Very well. He who must not be named is coming," she told the other teachers. Sprout and Flitwick gasped. Slughorn let out a low groan. "Potter has work to do in the castle on Dumbledore's orders. We need to put in place every protection of which we are capable while Potter does what he needs to do." "You realise, of course, that nothing will be able to keep out you-know-who indefinitely," squeaked Professor Flitwick. "But we can hold him up," said Professor Sprout. "Thank you, Pomona," said Professor McGonagall, and between the two witches there passed a look of grim understanding. "I suggest we establish basic protection round the place, then gather our students and meet in the Great Hall. Most must be evacuated, though if there are any of age who wish to stay and fight, I think they ought to be given the chance." "Agreed," said Professor Sprout, already hurrying toward the door. "I shall meet you in the Great Hall in 20 minutes with my house." And as she jogged out of sight, they could hear her muttering, "Tentacular, Devil's Snare, and Snargaluff pods. Yes, I'd like to see the Death Eaters fighting those." "I can act from here," said Flitwick, and although he could barely see out of it, he pointed his wand through the smashed window and started murmuring incantations of great complexity. Harry heard a weird rushing noise, as though Flitwick had unleashed the power of the wind into the grounds. "Professor," Harry said, approaching the little charms master. "Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is really important. Have you got any idea where the diadem of Ravenclaw is?" "Protego horribilis! The diadem of Ravenclaw?" squeaked Flitwick. "A little extra wisdom never goes amiss, Potter, but I hardly think it would be much use in this situation." "I only meant, do you know where it is? Have you ever seen it?" "Seen it? Nobody has seen it in living memory. Long since lost, boy." Harry felt a mixture of desperate disappointment and panic. What, then, was the Horcrux? "We shall meet you and your Ravenclaws in the Great Hall, Phileas," said Professor McGonagall, beckoning to Harry and Luna to follow her. They just reached the door when Slughorn rumbled into speech. "My word," he puffed, pale and sweaty, his walrus moustache a-quiver. "What a to-do! I'm not at all sure whether this is wise, Minerva. He is bound to find a way in, you know, and anyone who has tried to delay him will be in most grievous peril." "I shall expect you and the Slytherins in the Great Hall in 20 minutes or so," said Professor McGonagall. "If you wish to leave with your students, we shall not stop you. But if you in any way attempt to sabotage our resistance or take up arms against us within the castle, then, Horace, we duel to kill."
"Minerva!"
he said aghast. "The time has come for Slytherin House to decide upon its loyalties," interrupted Professor McGonagall. "Go and wake your students." Harry did not stay to watch Slughorn sputter. He and Luna ran after Professor McGonagall, who'd taken up a position in the middle corridor and raised her wand.
"Period totem! Oh, for heaven's sake, Filch, not now!"
The aged caretaker had just come hobbling into view, shouting,
"Students out of bed! Students in the corridors!" "They're supposed to be, you blithering idiot!" shouted McGonagall. "Now, go and do something constructive. Find Peeves."
"Peeves?" stammered Filch, as though he'd never heard of the name before.
"Yes, Peeves, you fool. Peeves! Haven't you been complaining about him for a quarter of a century? Go and fetch him at once."
Filch evidently thought Professor McGonagall had taken leave of her senses, but hobbled away, hunch-shouldered, muttering under his breath.
"And now, per totem locomotor!" cried Professor McGonagall.
And all along the corridors the statues and suits of armour jumped down from their plinths, and from the echoing crashes from the floors above and below Harry knew that their fellows throughout the castle had done the same.
"Hogwarts is threatened!" shouted Professor McGonagall. "Man the boundaries! Protect us! Do your duty to our school!"
Clattering and yelling, the horde of moving statues stampeded past Harry, some of them smaller, others larger than life. There were animals, too, and the clanking suits of armour brandished swords and spiked balls on chains.
"Now, Potter," said McGonagall, "you and Miss Lovegood had better return to your friends and bring them to the Great Hall. I shall rouse the other Gryffindors."
They parted at the top of the next staircase, Harry and Luna running back to the concealed entrance of the Room of Requirement. As they ran, they met crowds of students, most wearing travelling cloaks over their pyjamas, being shepherded down to the Great Hall by teachers and prefects.
"That was Potter! Harry Potter! It was him, I swear, I just saw him."
But Harry did not look back, and at last they reached the entrance to the Room of Requirement. Harry leaned against the enchanted wall, which opened to admit them, and he and Luna sped back down the staircase.
What?
As the room came into view, Harry slipped down a few stairs in shock. It was packed, far more crowded than it had been when he was there before. Kingsley and Lupin were looking up at him, as were Oliver Wood, Katie Bell, Angelina Johnson and Alicia Spinnet, Bill and Fleur, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley.
"Harry, what's happening?"
said Luna, meeting him at the front of the stairs. "Voldemort's on his way. They've barricading the school. Snape's run for it." "What are you doing here? How did you know?" "We sent messages to the rest of Dumbledore's army," Fred explained. "You couldn't expect everyone to miss the fun, Harry. And the DA let the Order of the Phoenix know, and it's all kind of snowballed." "What first, Harry?" called George. "What's going on?" "They're evacuating the younger kids and everyone's meeting in the Great Hall to get organised," Harry said. "We're fighting." There was a great roar and a surge from the foot of the stairs. He was pressed back against the wall as they ran past him, the mingled members of the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army, and Harry's old Quidditch team, all with their wands drawn, heading into the main castle. "Come on, Luna," Dean called as he passed, holding out his free hand. She took it and followed him back up the stairs. The crowd was thinning. Only a little knot of people remained below in the room of requirement, and Harry joined them. Mrs. Weasley was struggling with Ginny. Around them stood Lupin, Fred, George, and Bill. "You're underage!" Mrs. Weasley shouted at her daughter as Harry approached. "I won't permit it. Yes, the boys, but you've got to go home." "I won't!" Ginny's red hair flew as she pulled her arm out of her mother's grip. "I'm in Dumbledore's army. A teenagers' gang." "A teenagers' gang that's about to take him on, which no one else has dared to do," said Fred. "She's 16, shouted Mrs. Weasley. "She's not old enough. What you two are thinking, bringing her with you." Fred and George looked slightly ashamed of themselves. "Mum's right, Ginny," Bill said gently. "You can't do this. Everyone underage will have to leave. It's only right." "I can't go home," Ginny shouted, angry tears sparkling in her eyes. "My whole family's here. I can't stand waiting alone and not knowing, and—" Her eyes met Harry's for the first time. She looked at him beseechingly, but he shook his head and she turned away bitterly. "Fine," she said, staring at the entrance to the tunnel back to the Hogshead. "I'll say goodbye now, then, and—" There was a scuffling and a great shump. Someone else had clambered out of the tunnel, overbalanced slightly and fallen. He pulled himself up on the nearest chair, looked round through lopsided horn-rimmed glasses and said, "Am I too late? Has it started? I only just found out, so I... Harry spluttered into silence. Evidently he'd not expected to run into most of his family. There was a long moment of astonishment, broken by Fleur turning to Lupin and saying in a wildly transparent attempt to break the tension, "So, how is little Teddy?" Lupin blinked at her, startled. The silence between the Weasleys seemed to be solidifying like ice. "Oh, yes, he's fine," said Lupin loudly. "Yes, Tonks is with him, at his mother's." Percy and the other Weasleys were still staring at each other, frozen. "Here, I've got a picture!" Lupin shouted, pulling a photograph from inside his jacket and showing it to Fleur and Harry, who saw a tiny baby with a tuft of bright turquoise hair waving fat fists at the camera. "I was a fool!" Percy roared, so loudly that Lupin nearly dropped the photograph. "I was an idiot, a pompous prat. I was a ministry-loving, family-disowning, power-hungry moron," said Fred. Percy swallowed. "Yes, I was." "Well, you can't say it fairer than that," said Fred, holding out his hand to Percy. Mrs. Weasley burst into tears. She ran forward, pushed Fred aside, and pulled Percy into a strangling hug while he patted her on the back, his eyes on his father. "I'm sorry, Dad," Percy said. Mr. Weasley blinked rather rapidly, then he too hurried along to hug his son. "What made you see sense, Perce?" inquired George. "It's been coming on for a while," said Percy, mopping his eyes under his glasses with the corner of his travelling cloak. "But I had to find a way out, and it's not so easy at the Ministry. They're imprisoning traitors all the time. I managed to make contact with Aberforth, and he tipped me off about 10 minutes ago that Hogwarts was going to make a fight of it. So here I am." "Well, we do look to our prefects to take a lead in times such as these," said George, in a good inspiration of Percy's most pompous manner. "Now let's get upstairs and fight, or all the good Death Eaters will be taken." "So you're my sister-in-law now?" said Percy, shaking hands with Fleur as they hurried off toward the staircase with Bill, Fred and George. "Ginny!" barked Mrs. Weasley. Ginny had been attempting, under the cover of reconciliation, to sneak upstairs too. "Molly, how about this?" said Lupin. "Why doesn't Ginny stay here? Then at least she'll be on the scene and know it's going on, but she won't be in the middle of the fighting." "That's a good idea," said Mr. Weasley firmly. "Ginny, you stay in this room, you hear me?" Ginny did not seem to like the idea much, but under her father's unusually stern gaze she nodded. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Lupin headed off for the stairs as well. "Where's Ron?" asked Harry. "Where's Hermione?" "They must have gone up to the Great Hall already," Mr. Weasley called over his shoulder. "I didn't see them pass me," said Harry. "They said something about a bathroom," said Ginny, "not long after you left." "A bathroom?" Harry strode across the room to open the door leading off to the room of requirement and checked the bathroom beyond. It was empty. "Are you sure they both said bath—" But then his scar seared and the room of requirement vanished. He was looking through the high wrought iron gates with winged boars on pillars at either side, looking through the dark grounds toward the castle, which was ablaze with lights. Nagini lay draped over his shoulders. He was possessed of that cold, cruel sense of purpose that preceded murder.
McGonagall's back. And I guess unforgivable curses are just fair game now.
For the greater good.
For the greater good. Everyone believes that. Once he Cruciatus, the one brother. I thought McGonagall was gonna say something, but she was like, "Oh, good move."
Yep, all is fair in love and war.
Mm-hmm.
This is war, son.
Exactly.
I love how Harry is like, Bellatrix was right. You gotta mean it.
Mm-hmm.
I love Harry's gut reaction to defending her. He spat at you. I won't have that.
That's his McGonagall.
That's his McGonagall. Yeah. I just love their relationship and how she's just like, Potter's in my house? What would he be doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Potter's a Gryffindor, thank you.
And then bam, there he is.
Yeah. It's just such a great moment. We waited all book for McGonagall to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes out swinging.
Yes, she does.
She's not playing.
Literally swinging at Snape.
Yes. Yes. 3-on-1. Not fair. Not a fair fight. At all. He's lucky he got away.
Yeah. He is.
I mean, McGonagall's a fierce witch. Flitwick is no pushover either. You know he knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
For Snape to get away, this is pretty good.
Well, Snape wouldn't have to if he wasn't a twat. Well, he is.
Okay. Such language.
I mean, we're getting to the end of the book, and nothing has changed my opinion on Snape whatsoever, so I don't know what you're waiting for. Do you still want to say he's misunderstood?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
But I don't know how well you can trust me.
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to change my opinion on Snape. Just saying. But it is good to see that Percy has seen the error of his ways and is back.
Right, it was great for the Weasleys to reunite.
Mm-hmm.
Everything comes full circle. Even Percy's like, I'm sorry, guys. I was an idiot. I was a fool.
About to see what a prefect can do now.
Right? God.
And where did Ron and Hermione go? The bathroom. The only thing I can think of is they're going to Myrtle's bathroom.
Why do they want to go to Myrtle's bathroom?
I don't know.
I think if you think about it, it makes sense.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is they thought that maybe the Horcrux is hidden in the Chamber of Secrets because that's the only... Because Voldemort was the only one who could speak Parseltongue, so he's the only one who could enter it. But why, if they're intelligent enough to figure that out, would they go up there to the bathroom without Harry, the only other person who can speak Parseltongue, and open the Chamber of Secrets?
I'm just telling you, they went to the bathroom.
Maybe talk to Myrtle? Or maybe they just wanted some alone time before the fights.
Oh, get a little before they die?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Either way, though, nobody seems to know where the diadem is.
Yes.
That seems to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. And Myrtle only died 50 years ago, so she wouldn't know where it is.
No.
They're gonna travel down to the lake? I don't know. Maybe Myrtle knows it's in the lake or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe Myrtle knows where he hid it?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, she travels around.
Myrtle knows a lot of
stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, she has nothing better to do than to float around Hogwarts.
And listen
going
to
to
gossip.
the lake and wherever else.
Listen to all the gossip and the secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Myrtle does know a lot of shit. Oh. How cool was it though? McGonagall doing that spell and all the statues and everything, and she's just like, defend the school, charge! All the statues, all the suits of armor. Like, I wouldn't want to fight that. How do you fight a statue?
I think Voldemort can figure it out.
I think Voldemort can figure it out. I have no doubts about that. I'm not talking about Voldemort. I'm talking about the likes of the Caro siblings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the caliber of his followers right there.
But I mean, I guess you can look at this situation in two ways. Voldemort has Harry trapped in Hogwarts, or does Harry have all the Horcruxes in one place?
He might if he can find the Ravenclaw thing. And Nagini will be with Voldemort.
Exactly.
So.
And Voldemort's there, so everything's there in one place, ready for Harry to destroy it.
Yep.
Except the Sword of Gryffindor.
Yeah.
We'll,
imbibe with that basilisk.
Mm-hmm.
Basilisk venom. Basilisk.
You know, was there a Gryffindor Horcrux?
Dumbledore didn't think so.
Mm.
Dumbledore think he never got that far. Because the only objects were the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess technically the hat. But the hat is kind of different because it's got brains in it.
It would snitch.
Dumbledore! Dumbledore! There's another thing inside me.
It keeps hissing at me.
Yeah. That's the only other known relic is the sword, so I don't think he ever had the opportunity to get a Gryffindor thing.
Oh. I was just curious. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where Ron and Hermione went, other than maybe they wanted some alone time in case one of them died, you know.
Just trying to have a few private moments to themselves.
Yes. Ron was gonna show Hermione some of the stuff Lavender taught him.
Oh, I see. Maybe.
Anything else in this chapter that I'm missing?
12 fail-safe ways to charm witches.
Yeah.
Oh, another big pointer. McGonagall's Patronus.
Oh, yeah, it's a cat.
Not just one. 3.
Yeah, but she sent one to each
But
house.
she produced 3.
Yeah.
No one else has produced 3. It's just awesome. 3 cats. Triple cat threat.
Okay.
No one else has produced 3. I feel like that's probably not very easy. Harry can't even produce 3.
Harry hasn't tried. Like, he hasn't tried to send a message with his Patronus.
And he still struggles to produce his Patronus sometimes. I'm just saying, let's just recognize. It's just 3 out of nowhere. I mean, I get it. She's had a long time to practice.
I know, but I don't. Maybe sending a message is easier. It doesn't have to be as powerful to, you know, you're trying to fend off 100 Dementors. You want that thing to be pristine. But sending a message, you know, you just want it to get there and say your message.
I'm just saying I thought it was cool that she produced 3. That's all I'm saying. I'm more impressed with this than you are. It's okay.
Yes. I mean, I'm not doubting that McGonagall is an amazing witch or anything. I think she's very talented. Probably up there with Dumbledore. I mean, Dumbledore's a little bit higher, but, you know, right there.
Yeah, Dumbledore's
But I
higher
don't-
for sure.
We haven't had any reference to base how hard 3 Patronuses are, you know?
Okay, fair enough.
And like, if she produced 3 Patronuses to face off the Dementors, I think that would be a little bit easier to judge, but I don't know. Like I said, you know, you're just sending a message. It doesn't have to be as powerful.
Which also confirms that McGonagall does not conjure the silver doe.
Yes, that is true.
Will we find out?
I'm assuming yes. What's the next chapter?
I don't know if you're going to be able I don't know.
Hogwarts Battleground or something.
I don't know if you're going to be able to figure out what's going to go down in this next chapter, because the chapter is called The Battle of Hogwarts. So you were close.
Well, I think they're going to have some form of confrontation within the premises of their school, Hogwarts. Am I close?
You might be. You might. It's a good theory.
There's going to be spellcasting and...
Maybe death.
Most likely death.
Might be some dead people.
You have a big fight with Voldemort. People are going to die.
Yeah.
It happens. It's war.
It's war. It happens. People die.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the deal. Maybe Harry will get a chance to look for the thing. Maybe Harry will find the thing.
Maybe Ron and Hermione will find the thing.
Maybe Ron and Hermione will spend the whole time in the bathroom and they'll be safe.
Maybe. They're just in there making Horcruxes.
You never know. There was one, you said that, and there was, one other thing I wanted to point out, and you said Horcruxes, and now I'm just like, oh.
It's totally shifted your mind.
Yes, it did, because
I hate when that happens.
I started to think about Horcrux creation.
Ew.
Sorry, well, it's not pleasant. It obviously distracted me for what I wanted to say.
Also, I doubt Ginny's gonna actually stay in the room of requirements.
Yeah, bullshit. You know she's gonna leave as soon as she has a chance. Oh! That's what I wanted to say. Slughorn, the whole time. I missed him so much.
I know.
I missed Slughorn so much. And he spends the whole time just like, ugh, what? We're gonna fight? That's dangerous. Harry, my boy! What are you doing here?
Just in a constant state of confusion.
The poor man. He's so old and chonky. How is he going to fight anyone?
Oh, that's another thing. McGonagall. Get your Slytherins in line. They're not we aim to kill.
Yeah, no joke. Slytherins, figure out what you're doing. Leave or fight. Figure it out. It's time they show their allegiance to... Okay. Slughorn's like, oh, Jesus, okay.
How is he going to explain that to the kids? Think of the first years, man. Alright, kids, so the thing is, there might be a fight, so you either need to leave, or you might die.
Well, they did say only students of age can stay and fight. Everyone else has to go home.
Yeah, but if you're fighting for the Death Eaters, I mean, is Voldemort gonna care? Oh, you're only 13? I don't care. Get in there, kid.
No, Voldemort's not gonna
Protect
care.
me. You'll be a good shield. You're big enough. You'll block a spell or two before
you die.
You outlive your usefulness.
Oh yeah, Voldemort wouldn't care. No way.
Exactly. So the Death Eater kids, I mean, I'm sure they're gonna stay. They're gonna have to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not even whether or not they want to. They're not gonna have a choice. Because if they try to leave, their parents are gonna be like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want the Dark Lord to be angry at us? Get your ass back in there. That's why I feel for the Death Eater kids. How much choice do they really have? Really. To a certain degree, yeah, they don't really have much choice. It sucks. They're paying for the sins of their parents. That's the bummer. Draco's learning that the fucking hard way.
Well, yeah.
Crabbe and Goyle seem to be really into it, but Draco's like, I'm not feeling this. This is bad. I don't want to be hurting people and stuff. Just wanted to be mean to Harry Potter. That was it.
Should have been a Hufflepuff, man. What can I tell you?
Also, I freaking love that Oliver Wood and all the Quidditch team showed up.
Yeah, that's true. It's good to see Oliver again.
The whole team came back. Like, the whole team. It was awesome.
Elrowood has 2 rules. You never cancel Quidditch. You don't fuck with Harry Potter.
That's right. The best seeker he ever had. Won him all his games. I think it was book 3 with the Dementors or whatever, where he was like, well, if he falls off his broom. Oh, the firebolt. I think it was about the firebolt. Well, Harry, as long as you catch the snitch, it doesn't matter. If you die in the attempt, it's okay. Or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, he was talking to McGonagall.
Yeah, trying to convince her to let him have the firebolt. It's a firebolt! If he dies in the attempt of catching the snitch, if he catches the snitch...
Oh yeah, because the firebolt was cursed. Well, they thought it might be cursed.
Right, because they thought Sirius sent him the broom. Which...
He did.
He did. He just...
Sirius wasn't the bad guy they thought he was.
Right. And Sirius wasn't Lupin like you thought he was.
No.
That was so funny. You were so ride or die for that theory for so long. Lupin Sirius, I know it. I know it! You ride or die for your end of book theory?
Mm-hmm.
Harry's gonna fight Voldemort.
Mm-hmm.
Have to run away and recoup his losses.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he can't beat Voldemort right now. I mean, we've still got, 6 more chapters to go?
I think it's 6.
It's gonna be a boring 5 chapters if he beats Voldemort now, I'm just saying.
Yeah, 6 more chapters. And then the epilogue. Which means... we read this.
5 chapters of just Harry going back to normal life.
Which means...
maybe Harry going through, like, PTSD from his crazy childhood and therapy.
So, with that being said, everyone, I'm sure you've missed Minerva McGonagall. I know you have. All book you've been waiting for her.
Too long.
Too long. So, please like, comment, and subscribe, and join us next time for Chapter 31, The Battle of Hogwarts.